Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the most popular video game mascots of all time, and he is no stranger to cartoon adaptations. Starting out with 2 cartoon shows airing at the same time, with Family Matters star Jaleel White in the title role. The first one, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, was targeted more toward younger audiences with its lighthearted slapstick comedy. The second one, simply titled Sonic the Hedgehog, or as fans call it, Sonic Said AM, was a post-apocalyptic action-adventure targeted towards older kids. And while Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog wasn't remembered that fondly, outside of meme culture, Sonic Said AM is considered one of the best Sonic shows of all time. The next cartoon series was Sonic Underground. This series tried to combine the dark tones of Sonic Said AM with the slapstick comedy of Adventures, resulting in a show that didn't really know what it wanted to be. Not to mention that it had a story that not many fans were on board with. Admittedly, the show did have its moments, but it is considered by fans to be the worst out of all the Sonic shows. It wouldn't be until the mid-2000s when we got a new Sonic show, this time an anime called Sonic X. Taking elements from the modern era of Sonic, this series focused more on character dynamics and serialized storytelling, resulting in a pretty good series. I even think the English dub is a guilty pleasure.
It was about this high, it was blue, and it looked like a freak.
After that series ended, it wouldn't be until the mid-2010s when we got a new Sonic series titled Sonic Boom, based off of the branding of the same name. This series had less focus on story and more on character dynamics, action, and well-written comedy, which resulted in a very entertaining series in my opinion. But due to the failure of the Sonic Boom branding, it was inevitably cancelled. In late 2020 and early 2021, a new Sonic the Hedgehog series was announced, developed by Man of Action Entertainment, the same people who were behind Ben 10, Ultimate Spider-Man, and Mega Man Fully Charged. It is also said to be canon to the games, which is a pretty bold claim. As expected, an announcement like this has generated a lot of hype. But now that the series has finally been released, does it live up to the hype? Well, let's find out. So the series opens up with Sonic running past Big the Cat? Now I'm getting some deja vu from Sonic X. Opening up your new Sonic series with a character everybody hates. That can't be a good sign. Anyway, Dr. Eggman has been searching for something called the Paradox Prism. But when he finds it, Sonic and his friends come to stop him. The resulting fight ends with Sonic destroying the Paradox Prism before Eggman gets a chance to use it. However, that was probably not a good idea because the prism explodes into a giant burst of light. And the next thing we know, Sonic the Hedgehog is sent to a dystopian future at first glance. Something is not right. He meets up with some familiar faces, but they look different, have different personalities, and they don't recognize him. After a small encounter with not just one Dr. Eggman, but 5 of varying ages, he encounters what appears to be the Paradox Prism, but smaller. Looking for answers, he touches it, and he disappears, finding himself transported to another world, revealing that that was not an alternate future, but instead an alternate dimension. So yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog is traveling through alternate dimensions, trying to find his home. To be honest, the series kinda reminds me of Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle, a series about traveling to alternate dimensions by collecting certain hidden objects. Not to mention, the idea of Sonic traveling to parallel universes and meeting alternate versions of his friends is nothing new. Notable examples include the Archie comics and the storybook games. That being said, it's still not a bad concept, and it can work well if done right. And in my opinion, they pull it off. The thing that sells it for me is the fact that Sonic doesn't exist in any of these alternate dimensions, with Sonic seeing how different the world could be without his influence, giving it a bit of a Wonderful Life feel. And seeing Sonic go through this emotional journey is probably the show's biggest strength, because it leads to some great moments of drama. A perfect example is when he meets the dystopian version of Tails. He has been his friend since Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and seeing him grow up without any friends at all is kind of heartbreaking. And the scene is very well handled. You can see the emotions on both characters' faces. It's very well animated, and the voice acting sells it even more.
Why do you think I live down here? To avoid everyone.
Speaking of which, the animation is really well done. Everything has a bit of a high energy feel to it. It's busy, but not too busy that you don't know what to focus on. I also have to give props to the environments. I mean, sure, the dimensions are kinda gimmicky, but they do make sense in their own ways, and can lead to some pretty interesting theories. Characters look great and are very expressive, and I especially like how the alternate versions of the characters match the environments, yet are still recognizable as their characters. The series also features a bunch of extras, and I have mixed feelings about this. I like the fact that they show that there are more characters in these worlds besides the ones we know. It makes the worlds feel more lived in. With that being said, however, these background characters all look way too generic. It's like someone clicked random a few times on the character customizer of Sonic Forces and called it a day. And they clearly didn't do it enough times because there are scenes that have two of the same character. What's weird is that Sonic Boom had a decent amount of background characters with unique designs, so why couldn't they do it in Sonic Prime? Now, to be fair, one could argue that they're supposed to be generic because they're not the main focus. Sonic and his friends are. Makes sense, but it does make me tilt my head at something that I'm going to bring up later. In the meantime, there's an aspect of the animation that is kinda confusing to me. There are moments when the show integrates sprite animation, similar to Mega Man Fully Charged. Now, to be fair, I actually kinda like them. They add a decent amount of charm to the series, even if they do come out of nowhere. The issue that I have with them is that they feel kind of pointless. They look like they're supposed to be used for flashback purposes, which would be fine, but then we also have flashback scenes that don't incorporate the sprite work, instead being the same animation we see throughout the series. So why would you even need the sprite animation at all? In fact, I kinda forgot they were a thing until I rewatched the series. The action scenes are exactly what you would expect for a Sonic series. It's well animated, fast-paced, and the way each character fights makes sense given their traits and abilities. And while I do like that, there are moments when the action scenes do tend to drag a bit. In fact, I think there was one episode that was nothing but action. There was also a few moments where they repeated certain frames of animation, which felt like padding. Other than that, definitely good stuff. As for the show's pacing itself, yeah, I can understand why people think it's fast, but I watch a lot of Netflix shows, so I'm kinda used to it. Besides, I don't even think the pacing is that bad. There's still enough story and character moments to keep me invested. Now, one thing I do have an issue with is the humor. Now, to be fair, there are some moments that did make me laugh. But then there are other moments that kind of make me tilt my head. It could be a joke that sounds more awkward than funny, or it could be a joke that starts out decently but doesn't quite hit the landing. Now I know the target demographic is children, and things that are funny for children will not always be as funny for adults. I guess after coming off the hilarious Sonic Boom, I was kind of expecting something more. Though to be fair, the show's main focus was on comedy. I honestly wouldn't mind if the humor wasn't always funny, if they didn't feel so forced and unnecessary. I can't help but compare it to the CGI reboot of He-Man. Don't get me wrong, I actually like that series, but the show's humor is more distracting than it is funny. Though granted, Sonic Prime's humor doesn't feel nearly as juvenile as He-Man's. Anyway, let's talk about the voice acting. Due to Canadian content and union laws, they had to cast Canadian voice actors for the role of the characters. Now, recasting Sonic and his friends for a TV series is nothing new, since Sonic X had to use New York-based voice actors. And honestly, I have nothing against this. As much as I like the current voice cast, there is nothing wrong with seeing what other actors bring to the table. That being said, it doesn't really help their claim that this is in the same universe as the games. Anyway, as for the cast itself, they're mostly pretty decent. First off, there's Sonic, voiced by Devin Mack, and he's fine. There's nothing really wrong with his voice, it's a good fit for Sonic, but there really isn't anything unique about it. I mean, most of the other actors who played Sonic were able to bring something interesting to the role, but this Sonic feels kinda generic in my opinion.
Pardon me, what do you call this place? Are you ignoring me? You're ignoring me.
Now, Brian Drummond, who played Knuckles in Sonic Underground, is a great Dr. Eggman. He's like a nice balance between Dean Bristow and Mike Pollard.
It was only a rumor for so long, and now, inches from my grasp.
Although the concept of 5 Eggmen of varying ages is kinda weird to me. Now, to be fair, I think Eggman is at his best when he has someone else to work off of, but this almost feels a bit like overkill. Tails is voiced by Ashley Ball, who is best known for My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and honestly, when I first heard her voice, it kinda sounded like a male version of Rainbow Dash.
Something's not right. I gotta figure out what Eggman is up to.
That is until we get to the alternate versions of Tails, where she really gets a chance to shine. In fact, I think she might even be one of my favorite actresses for Tails, right up there with Colleen O'Shaughnessy. However, I can't say the same for Adam Narada's Knuckles. It's like he's trying to do a fusion of Dan Green's emo Knuckles and Idris Elba's Klingon Knuckles, but without any of the charisma. So instead of sounding cool, he just sounds flat and boring.
Eggman's got us fighting the bandits so he can have Sonic all to himself.
Now, the alternate versions of Knuckles are voiced by Vincent Tong, and he honestly sounds more like Knuckles than Adam does. So why didn't they just cast him as the main one?
For a better tomorrow! Who's with me?
Amy is voiced by Shannon Chan Kent, who was also the singing voice for Pinkie Pie, and even had a cameo in the live-action movie. She's a pretty good Amy, but much like Devin Max Sonic, there really isn't much that stands out. Well, outside of her amazing performance as the Primal version, and one scene that delves into Amy's character. But I just really want to hear her call out for Sonic.
Sure would be nice if you'd stick to the plan.
Now, what's interesting to me is how they handle Sonic and Amy's relationship. Now, after watching the first season, it feels pretty obvious that they're trying to make it ambiguous, which makes sense. But when I saw the first episode, it almost made me feel like this was a role reversal. There's a scene where Sonic appears to be flirting with Amy, but she doesn't seem to respond to it. Honestly, this might have just been me looking too deep into things, but if that was the case, I wouldn't mind seeing where it went. Rouge is voiced by Kasumi Evans, who was Rarity's singing voice. And this is a very unique performance. Instead of sounding overly seductive like Kathleen Delaney or Karen Strassman, she sounds like a less over-the-top version of Lonnie Manella, which I am really digging. It feels like a breath of fresh air.
Stealth is not your thing. But it's adorable you're willing to try.
And finally, we have Ian Hanlon, who plays Big the Cat. And honestly, his portrayal sounds way too normal. I feel like he should have been dumber.
No problem, Sonic.
What's weird is that his performance as the Primal version sounds more like Big than the normal one.
I told you it was too dangerous. We should make do with what we have.
Now, I would probably stop there if it wasn't for one thing. The show has guest stars. And they're the type of guest stars that you wouldn't expect. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but let's just say it's great seeing them branch out. That being said, I'm kind of disappointed that these characters have the same generic designs as the rest of the extras. And what's worse is that these characters actually have distinct personalities. One of them even has a backstory. So they couldn't have given them something to make them look more distinguished from the rest of the characters? I mean, come on, give us something. There was one more thing that I need to talk about, and that is the season finale. I'm going to go into spoiler territories, so I'm going to leave a timer at the bottom of the video. You see, throughout the series, Sonic has been pursued by Shadow. And let me just say that I'm glad he is not stupid in this. Well, at least for the most part. Anyway, by the end of the season, Shadow finally catches up with Sonic.
I just want to go home. Home doesn't exist anymore.
This concerns me. Not due to the fact that Sonic might not make it back home, because of course he's gonna make it back home, but when he inevitably does, what's going to happen to the rest of the dimensions? Will they all cease to exist? I hope not, because in each dimension, Sonic has been changing the lives of the inhabitants for the better. And if they all cease to exist by the end, then what is the point of anything? I don't want this to become another Samurai Jack, because by the end it'll feel like I just wasted my time. Hopefully it won't end like this, and every dimension will still exist even when Sonic finds his way home. In the end, Sonic Prime is a great series, even if it's not perfect. Despite the action dragging a bit and the humor being hit or miss, it makes up for it with an interesting concept, pretty good voice acting, and some great drama. I am curious to see where this show is heading, and if he's going to explore other dimensions, like a Wild West dimension or one based on feudal Japan. There's a lot of great potential here, but we're going to have to wait and see if the rest of the series lives up to it. In the meantime, it's a pretty fun series that's worth checking out if you're a Sonic fan. I'm the Redshirt Reviewer, and thanks for watching.